Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for clicking on the video as always. I'm back in the Cairngorm National Park. I'm planning 2 nights. We're just making our way into the spot at the moment. It's one of my favourite spots. If you followed me for a while, you'll have seen a couple of videos here already. I've got the hot tent with me and the new wood stove, although it's incredibly warm right now. I've just got my t-shirt on and I'm too warm. It's about 13-14 degrees, and if the sun wasn't lower you would think it was much earlier on in the year. But yeah, I've got Derek with me as well, and we're just tramping through this heather along the river just now, and we'll get in. I'll maybe have a quick coffee and a break, and then we'll get set up. Right guys, had my coffee there just by the river, and as much as I love that spot, I'm not going to camp there tonight, I don't think. I'm going to head to the top of the hill here. This is where some of the really nice forest is up the top, big pines and things. I'm going to see if I can find somewhere I can tuck myself away up there. It is handy sort of having the water source right beside me down here, but the water makes quite a bit of noise, and I actually like that, but for filming it's not great. And last time I filmed a video here, yeah, there was a lot of background noise. So but I would say bored's probably not the right word, but I've camped down here the last 3 times I've been here, so I'd like something a little bit different. And also, at this time of year, down by the burn doesn't really get any sun, so hopefully I'll get a bit more sun up the top here. I've just been scouting around. I don't know if you can see my rucksack in the distance, but I found a spot. I just come back to get the wood stove and the camera. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. But look at the light in here. But yeah, I found a flattish spot. It's not always easy in these pine woods. They're quite lumpy, bumpy, thick heather, thick blaeberry, which you can't sleep on at a push, but if you can find a bit of a clearer area, it's quite nice. So yeah, I think this is going to be our spot for the next 2 nights. It's looking very nice. Lots of kind of dead branches and things for the wood stove, because that's also another difficult thing in these woods. You know, you don't want to be hacking down loads of wood in a nice place like this, but if you can, you know, collect this kind of stuff, no problem at all. So yeah, I'll get the tent set up just now. It's going to be a little different this time because some of you might remember that I broke the tent pole on my West Coast beach trip because the wind was so strong. So I don't actually have a pole for it. I'm going to look for a piece of wood to see if I could use that instead, but again, finding a nice straight pole in these kind of woods is not easy. So I might just try a ridge line. The tent's got a loop on the top of it, and the trees here kind of laid out that I think it might just work. So yeah, I'll get that set up and see how we get on. Right, change of plan. There's actually not enough room for the tent in this gap. So I need to put it more out in the open, which means that there's not actually a tree in the right place for the ridgeline. So I've gone back to the pole idea. I actually brought the pole with me. This is a broken one. And I've managed to find a relatively straight pole the same size as it. So I'll try this. Right, that's the wood stove in. Yeah, I can't believe how much quicker it is to set that thing up and put it in place. It literally took me a couple of minutes. So yeah, it's feeling like overkill at the moment though, because as you can see I'm still in a t-shirt, still very warm. There's actually a few midge and a couple of mosquitoes landed on my arm, so that shows you how mild it is still. It's just crazy. But I'll probably just collect a few bits of these dead branches and things for some firewood. I'm not going to need a big fire tonight, but it'll just be nice to sit beside in the evening and use it for cooking. And I'll get the rest of the bed and all that kind of stuff set up too. And I think that's us for the night, really. Like I say, it's 13th of November, so the days are getting pretty short now. It's pretty much dark by 5 p.m. But it looks like it'll be a clear night tonight, so it might be quite nice. The sky might be quite nice. I'll go and get some more water as well. I'll go back down to the river. I'm not far from it at all. I'm just right at the top of the hill. the fire on. It's too hot already. Yeah, I shut the door because the wind was making quite a lot of noise, but I'm going to have to open it again because this is just ridiculous. But yeah, I don't have anything fancy to cook tonight, just camp meals. So I'm actually going to have one of my Blaband meals that I took on the Sweden trip. I had a couple of them left over, so basically boil some water, and I might have another coffee as well. And I'm just really going to chill out. Don't really have a plan for the evening. It's 10 to 6 now. The joys of camping in November. The days are quite short. But yeah, I'll get this water on and get something to eat. Right guys, hopefully you can see me okay. It's 9:30. There's not much going on tonight. Yeah, I had dinner, hot chocolate, and then got a little bit of whiskey with me too. So I had a couple of swigs of Lafroig, and I think that's it for this evening. The wind's picking up quite a bit. But it's dry, and it's supposed to be dry and bright tomorrow as well, so it should be good. But yeah, I'll leave it there for tonight, and I will see you in the morning. Morning folks, beautiful morning. It was a bit cooler than was forecast last night. I think it dipped down to maybe 3 or 4, but yeah, more than comfortable in here. And it was actually too warm in the evening, so it was nice that it was a bit cooler actually. Yeah, that's the dog eating his food in the background, if you can hear that noise. Just over there. But yeah, it's 8:20 just now, having a very slow morning. Just got some water on to boil, got some coffee, and just some porridge. Nothing too exciting. Okay, so I've just sat down for a little bit because I wanted to talk about something. I've just been wandering around this morning, exploring the pinewood, and that's one of the reasons I love coming here, because I could just do that all day and not get bored of it. But again, I just wanted to clarify some terms that get thrown around when it comes to forest and nature conservation, and that is native and non-native. But to help me explain that, I'll take you all the way back to the last ice age, and the ice sheet basically covered the whole of the UK right down to, I think it's round about London. And when that ice sheet retreated, it basically scoured the land bare. So it was just a lot of kind of rock and rock material, silt and this kind of stuff. It's fairly inert. So what happens in ecology is that the process of things moving in and growing has to start somewhere. So seed from existing trees and shrubs move into these areas, and you would start off, you would kind of get woody shrubs and, just things that could grow on very poor, thin soils, if not just the rock itself. And they live and they die and decompose, and they spread their own seed as well. And that slowly starts to build up a soil. And as that soil improves, it can support more and bigger species. And it's almost like a conveyor belt that's then moving as the ice sheet's retreating. The ecological communities are kind of moving north behind it. And that process is called ecological succession. And that would have continued spreading out from London. You would have got small, woody shrubs, slowly building soils, lichens, these kind of things. And then it would have moved into bigger shrubs, and then trees would start to come in. When you get something like birch, when it drops its leaf litter, it tends to improve the soil quite quickly. And fast forward to today, up in Scotland, we ended up with these Scots pine forests. And at the moment, with this climate, we would call this the climax community. So the soils and the climate prevent that community from improving, if you want to call it that, anymore. So unless there's a dramatic change in the climate, as if it warms up, which means the soils can improve quicker and support, species that enjoy a more richer soil, then it'll stay like this. And that's why you get forest like ash and oak mixed forest further south, because the soils are richer and they're kind of further ahead in that ecological succession. But at the time, there was a land bridge between Europe and species that survived the Ice Age and the UK. And that seed came back in from those sort of remnant communities and started to recolonise. But as the ice sheets continued to melt, that land bridge disappeared, and any other species then couldn't carry on, moving in. So they almost ran out of time. So at that point in time, anything that was already or had already colonised the UK is today considered native. And anything that didn't is obviously non-native. So species like Scots pine, juniper, downy birch, they all made it. But species that are very present in Europe that aren't here, like Norway spruce, European larch, didn't make it. So they would be classed as non-native, and the Scots pine and birch would be classed as native. Now, there's obviously different levels of non-native. Norway spruce is sometimes called an honorary native because it would have been here if it had a little bit more time. But then you get the other extreme where the majority of our forests in the UK are made up of non-native timber plantations. And the species in those plantations are from northwest America. So you're talking Sitka spruce, lodgepole pine, Douglas fir. They're really non-native. They never would have made it here on their own. That brings me on to this pinewood here. So back before this pinewood was altered in any way by humans, in its primeval state, we ended up with a kind of Atlantic version of the core boreal forest. And the north of Scotland is often considered the most western outpost of the boreal forest. But because the pines here didn't really have, the larch or the Norway spruce to compete with, and the soils weren't quite as well developed as areas of Scandinavia, we ended up with this quite open-grown pine wood with these, big, twisted, gnarled granny pines that you don't really see in most of Scandinavia. And then that leads me on to talk about a couple other terms, and one of them is ancient woodland and what that actually means. So ancient or primeval woodland would have been that untouched forest, back thousands of years ago before we started altering things. Today, we would class this forest as ancient semi-natural forest because it's been altered so much by us, basically. You might be thinking, where does that classification come from? But it goes back to mapping. So if we look back as far as we can, when we first got reliable maps for these areas, we can see where there was a presence of forest. Now, for England, I think it goes back to 1600, and for Scotland, it goes back to 1750. So, if there was a forest map then, and it's still here today, and it's in a state something like this, in a kind of natural state, then we can call it ancient semi-natural woodland. Now obviously just because there was forest then and there's forest now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right forest. You would have areas that are now still under forest, but they've been cleared and they've been planted with something completely different. Then we cannot class that as ancient semi-natural woodland. But we can maybe class that as plantations on ancient woodland sites. So in that case, we can then take steps to try and restore the natural woodland to those sites, and that work is taking place across the country. So going back to the ancient semi-natural woodland, again, this is what this pine wood in Rothiemurchus in the national park is classed as. But it's not in its natural state, because essentially we've got a forest here of mature Scots pine and not a lot else. There's no young pine coming through, there's very little birch, rowan, alder, these other native species that should be a natural component. And this forest really is dying on its feet, because although these pine will live a long time, they don't live forever. And if there's no young trees coming through, then the forest dies. But fortunately, there's a lot of work taking place to make sure that doesn't happen, and I'll talk about that later in the video in terms of the Cairngorm Connect project. But some of these pines would have been here in 1750. They're old enough that they were there then and they're still surviving, no problem. But ancient semi-natural woodland components can also be trees that are clearly grown from seed from those original trees in 1750, and there's been a continuous presence of natural woodland on this site. It's relatively safe to say it's ancient semi-natural woodland. Right guys, as you can see it gets dark pretty quickly now. In the space of what, half an hour, it's pretty dark already. The wind's coming and going, but it's not too bad. The stove is burning a lot better now, a lot cleaner than last night, so can actually see the fire tonight, which is really nice, and it's creating quite a bit of ambient light in the tent, which is good. Right guys, it's actually 9:10. I've just had quite a chilled out evening, just enjoying being out. It's really nice to be out. I haven't actually been camping since I came back from Sweden, which is pretty much 2 months ago now, so yeah, it's good. I've missed it. But yeah, we'll get this popcorn on. I'm going to make some popcorn, and then I actually downloaded some of the new Lord of the Rings TV show. So yeah, I'm just going to sit out in the middle of the forest with some popcorn and watching some TV by the wood stove. I think people call that glamping. I usually just put a couple of kernels in, and then when they pop, you know that it's hot enough to put the rest in. Put the lid on. And the trick is that you want it hot, but you don't want it to catch and burn the popcorn, so I tend to just lift it off every now and again, just swirl it around so the kernels are getting coated in the hot oil. Oh, nice. Fresh popcorn. Just gonna eat this popcorn now and just chill out and watch an episode of this new Lord of the Rings TV show, and yeah, just call it a night. Yeah, I'll leave it there, and I'll see you in the morning. Morning, folks. I just had some coffee and breakfast. Again, just some porridge. Nothing exciting. It's a nice morning now, but it was incredibly windy last night. Really windy, to the point where I had a little bit of a panic I reached over to touch Darach about 3 o'clock in the morning, because he's usually sleeping beside me and he wasn't there. So I put my head torch on and he's not in the tent. Tent's still closed and everything, so I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? But also in a little bit of a panic too, because I don't know how long he's been gone and what direction he's wandered off in. So I got my boots on quickly and ran out with a head torch. Didn't even get dressed, just running around. If anyone saw me at that point, it would have been a bit strange. And because it was so windy, I started thinking, he's never going to hear me. I wouldn't have a chance of hearing him. And I started shouting anyway, looking around. I just picked a direction, started walking. This forest, if he wandered in the right direction, he would get lost in here and you would never find him for years. So yeah, obviously panicking a little bit, and walking and shouting. About maybe 100 meters away, just over that direction, my head torch picked up a pair of eyes, and I shouted him, and the eyes didn't move to begin with, so I thought, maybe it's not him. And I got a bit closer, and it was. He was curled up in the heather, a little bit damp because it had been raining last night too. But yeah, I was just so relieved to find him. Obviously it was pitch black as well. He's a black dog, so. But I think what's happened is, if you watch my beach camp trip where I actually broke the pole because it was so windy, I think he got a little bit freaked out on that trip because it was so windy last night. I think he's just pushed his way under one corner of the tent in a panic, as this is kind of rustling and making a noise, and then obviously couldn't get back in, and has decided to just lie down over there. So yeah, not a nice feeling though, because obviously you start to think the worst, and what am I going to do? Where is he again? Like, how long has he been gone? But anyway, he came back and he's here, so like nothing's happened. But I think I'm going to call it there, to be honest. There's rain forecast for around lunchtime, so I'm just going to get packed up here and walk out. It takes about maybe an hour and a half to walk out, and a couple hours drive home. So not much time for things this morning. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, it was really nice to get back out again after a couple months. The stove was brilliant, even though it wasn't really the right conditions to test it in. It's very mild, couple of days, but just in terms of setting up, ease of use, cooking, all that kind of stuff, I'm quite happy with it. If you want to find out more about this stove and just the hot tent and things in general, I put out a video last week about this stuff, so if you're interested or you missed it, check that one out. And yeah, if you stick around, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cairngorm Connect project for Forest Thoughts. So if you're interested in that, stick around. But if not, then I will see you on the next one. Right guys, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. It's not going to be a long one. I know I say that every time, but it's not. I'm going to put some links in the description, and if you're interested in the detail of what I'm talking about, they're the best places to go and read all about it. So yeah, I basically wanted to talk about the Cairngorm Connect project for a little bit. But the reason I wanted to bring it up again is I've obviously got a few more followers now, and I was actually at the Cairngorm Connect conference a few weeks ago, which was really good. It was an internal conference though for the sort of partnership organisations and some of the stakeholders, so it wasn't open to everyone, but it was still useful. And I'm not directly involved in the project because I don't work in this area, but I do work for Forestry and Land Scotland and some of the stuff in Africa. There's a lot of crossover there, so I was really keen to go along, and it was definitely worth it. The format was basically we would get a few short presentations on a certain subject, and then we would have a sort of half-hour discussion after that, and we were in groups at different tables, and then they would kind of shuffle us around so we weren't talking to the same people all the time. And I would say on the whole it was quite positive, a lot of good work being done, but I did notice a little bit that it's it's a little bit easy because it's one of these, like what you call an echo chamber. We're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet largely. We all understand the project and what we want it to achieve. I think the bigger challenge is going beyond that, getting more people invested, getting more people educated. And I suppose that's what I'm trying to do here a little bit, is just spread the message. So, what is the Cairngorm Connect project? Well, it's a European funded landscape scale landscape restoration project, really. The four main partnership organisations are Forestry and Land Scotland, formerly Forestry Commission Scotland, Nature Scot, formerly Scottish Natural Heritage, the RSPB, the largest nature conservation charity in the UK, and Wildland Estates, who own and manage Glenfeshie. And the project area is within the Cairngorm National Park. It covers about 600 square kilometres, I think it is, something like that. And it's basically from, the bottom of the glen right to the mountain tops and all the habitats in between. But the main aim of the project is to restore this landscape that I'm in right now in terms of habitats, wildlife, and also make sure that the landscape works more for people in terms of sort of natural resources, carbon sequestration, flood prevention, all these kind of environmental benefits that we need. And within this area, there's obviously a lot of designated habitats and species already, even though they're small fragments and small remnants. And part of the aim of the project is to build on that and expand them. Now, the areas that are involved loosely are Forestry and Land Scotland's Glenmore Forest, Rothiemurchus Forest, that kind of area, round about Lochmorlich. For wildland, you've got Glenfeshie and Glentromie. For RSPB, you've got Abernethy in the north and Inchmarshes to the south. But obviously that land holding also includes a huge list of invested stakeholders that are involved in projects on that ground or are affected by the ground. Cairngorm National Park Authority, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, plant life, butterfly conservation, wildcat projects, and all the communities around it. It's a huge host of things. But yeah, like I say, it's a really positive project. It's leading the charge really in the UK in terms of landscape scale restoration projects. I'll admit that a lot of these organisations are in a convenient position to do this kind of thing in terms of money and land. It's not going to be easy to replicate this, but not impossible either if people, neighbouring landowners can work together. And I think that's one of the biggest positives for me is the scale that this provides, because not only does this land hold some of the largest remnants of native woodland we have left, but with that joined up thinking, we can really start to tackle things like deer management. Certain landowners can manage the deer as well as they want to, but if they're surrounded by people with different objectives, it's almost an impossible task. So the fact that we can link up deer management and forest restoration across this large area, that's really positive, and that's when you really start to see sort of tangible benefits and progress. But again, the project also suffers a little bit from the fact that it is the sort of leading example, and it does have some of the best stuff we have left, because that puts a lot of pressure on it. And people want to increase tourism, increase visitors, increase the number of certain species like capercaillie. They want to bring back other species like wildcat, possibly lynx one day. We want to regenerate forest, all this kind of stuff. And on a world scale, it's still quite a small area, and there's only so much you can achieve in these areas. One of the things I sort of took from the conference was that you may have noticed in the news in the last couple of weeks that the latest capercaillie survey has come back, and it's thought there's only 500 capercaillie left in Scotland. So again, work continues to try and reverse that trend, but at the same time, work is happening to release wildcat back into pretty much the same area. Now I'm told that wildcat don't predate capercaillie or capercaillie chicks, and that's fine, and their preferred prey is rabbits and small mammals. Now, this side of the Spey, there's no rabbits. There just isn't. So if you reintroduce a predator that's looking for rabbits and there's no rabbits, but there's some vulnerable capercaillie chicks walking about, I don't think it's that far-fetched to think what may happen. And individually you want to save both species, but when you've got a limited area, there's only so much you can do. So where do you draw the line? What do you actually want to achieve with these projects long term? What can you realistically achieve? So yeah, there was some interesting things to think about there. I suppose another thing I took away from it, it's another obvious one, is that the disconnect, just the general disconnect of the public from these kind of things. Again, we were in that kind of echo chamber environment, and some of the discussions we were having were getting into quite a bit of detail, and a couple of times I kind of brought up the fact that it's easy for us to talk about this, but 99.9% of the population have no idea of what this project is or what we're talking about, or nature conservation or any of this stuff. So that's the biggest task, because that's one thing I get asked a lot from people. It's like, what can I physically do? And apart from doing these little things, helping to reinvest in the area, reading up about things, just I keep saying, spread the message, bring these things up in conversation. It might be a little bit awkward at first, but if you're in the lunchroom at work or whatever, just drop it in there. Have you heard about that Cairngorm Connect project? And chances are, depending on what industry you work in, people will go, no, what the hell are you talking about? And, you know, some people might not be interested, but maybe one person will kind of half listen and pick up a few things and maybe get interested. You never know. But that's really the biggest way to change for me, I think. We need to get the majority of people educated and the majority of people on board. And when that public pressure really builds, that's when we start to see real change. But anyway, yeah, I'll leave it there. Link will be in the description. Thanks again for watching the video. Thanks again for sticking around to listen to me ramble. And I will hopefully see you on the next one.